Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and we have an FAQ here for you guys, kind of FAQ, just kind of covering some topics that I've been seeing a lot of questions asked, whether it's through the Discord, personal messages, or even just some things that I've had conversation with players on. So if you guys want to like and subscribe, comment down below, let me know your thoughts, and let's give a huge shout out to the channel members for their continued support. Again, I very much appreciate all you guys, the Wampa Jedi Masters. Thank you guys for just continuing to put your faith in me. And to all of those who are on the council, you may not yet be granted the rank of Master, but you still have a very special place in my heart, and you are very much loved by the Fat Phil family. So let's get in here. Let's talk about, a couple of these questions. So the one question I saw a lot of players asking me is about the speeder bike raid. And in particular, when does it make sense to stop investing in this? Like, when should we start preparing for that next raid? For those of you who, if you're very, very new, the raids are no longer permanent. Or at least, like, the rewards. That before the speeder bike raid, you had the Crate Dragon raid. So when you go here, you see the Crate Dragon raid. The difference in the rewards, of course, is that the best level of the rewards moved from the Crate Dragon raid all the way down to, the speeder bike, right? The top end rewards move to the speeder bike raid. This is the featured raid. This is the one that everybody cares about. So you want to be doing this one, and that way you can earn as much of your currency as you can. But they're not permanent, right? They expire or the rewards change. And so because of that, you need to start thinking not only, you can't just think like, oh yeah, these characters are good in the raid, so I need to invest in them. But you've got to think about the time period that they're going to be good for. So here's kind of my thoughts on the matter, right? Like when to stop investing in this raid. It's because it is complicated. The first thing, before you think about any extra rewards you're going to get in the raid, what is your post-raid return on investment? At what point, when the raid goes away, what will you have left in your account? What will that provide for you? And the reason that's important to understand is, think about if I took Hera to Relic 7 and I took Iden to Relic 7. Well, Hera at Relic 7 doesn't really help me all that much. It's going to help me in the raid, but outside of the raid, she's not a character that I'm rushing to try to get to Relic 7. Whereas Iden at Relic 7, that could be pretty good, right? That would be a pretty solid investment. So that's kind of that analysis you need to do. Your Drogon and Scout Trooper, if you take them to Relic 8, after the raid is gone, what good does that Relic 8 do you? Is it something that's going to help your roster, or is it just kind of going to be something that at this point in time it's very important, and after the fact it's going to kind of fall to the wayside? So just understand that concept there. What is the post-raid return on investment? Then take into account the expiration date of the raid. Notice we haven't even yet talked about the rewards. What is the expiration date of the raid? So they said this raid would last anywhere from 8 to 10 months. This speeder bike raid dropped in November of 2023. So you figure sometime between July of 2024 and September of 2024, a new raid should be on the horizon and coming into the game. The reason you need to take that expiration date into account is that that's your time period for the return. That if you spend Relic 8s, do you have time to make those back in the raid? That will you earn those back in the raid? And then in the same time, not only will you earn them back, but what will you get on top of it? You don't just want to put a Relic 8 on a character, and then at the end of, July or September, whenever this raid goes away, you earned back that Relic 8. That's not a great investment, right? Like, you kind of lost something, because that Relic 8, if all it did is turn itself into another Relic 8, did it really help us compared to, hey, I did this Relic 8 and now I'm going to be able to get 2 Relic 8s by the end of the raid. That's return, right? So take that into consideration, because you also need to ask yourself, what would be that return on investment elsewhere? If you take those resources and put them into something else, what could it net you? So think about your Galactic Legends or, S-tier fleets, that putting those high relics on there could help you get those things. Fleets is a very high return on investment, whereas like Relic 8 on GLs, it's kind of hard to calculate what that return is, because like for myself, I can't increase my crystal income with Relic 8 GLs. It may help me stay in Kyber 1, but I'm not going to get more crystals because I did that. But if I was needing profundity, that could potentially increase my crystals because I'd be doing better in Fleet Arena. And then finally, this is when you think about the points. After you've done all that analysis, you said, okay, what am I going to get outside of the raid? When is the raid going away? If I put them somewhere else, would it get me anything that would, benefit me more? What is the points to your payout? What score do I need to do to actually get, more rewards? What will that look like? So for example, for myself, my personal reward track, I am scoring roughly almost 11 million points. So I still need to score 2.6 million points to even get the next reward tier, which is 100 of this currency. The resources I'd have to put into my account to get to this point are not worth it. I'm much more reliant on my guild saying, hey, we're going to go push for the next box. We need everybody to do this. And then we're going to get this much extra currency comparative to here. And that's going to allow us to earn back those resources. That to me would be, hey, I'll do this on my personal account because my entire guild is doing it. As you guys know, we said, no, we're not doing that. But for yourself, you can take those personal rewards into account depending on where you're scoring. Think about it. If you're able to increase your score from, say, like 400,000 to, 1.6 million, like that's a decent bit of rewards there, right? Like all of a sudden you're getting a really, really nice jump in rewards. You're getting a lot more currency every single raid, and that's just for yourself. So imagine that everybody in your guild does that. You're going to be able to earn that back in that time. And I kind of look at it and say, once you hit, I'd say this like 4.8, probably 3.5, that's where I'd say you have to be much more cognizant of the resources you're spending. That you're going from an 800,000, jump from 2.7 to 3.5 to, a 1.3 million more points between this tier and this tier. So it does get significantly harder to earn back that investment the higher that you're trying to increase your score from a personal perspective. And of course, same thing for your guild. Going from 144 to 208 is far different than going from 208 to 424 and then to like 600 million. That gap, that jump is huge. So you want to make sure you're understanding what the points to the payout are, and then kind of figure out, having taken into account the expiration date of the raid, putting them elsewhere, what do you get after the raid? And that's kind of the way I would analyze that. So that's how I would figure out whether it's worth it to stop investing in this raid, is you've got to take all of these things into account. So I know that's not an answer like now, because it's dependent on your roster. Just look at yourself and ask that question. That'd be a great thing for roster reviews. If you guys are ever curious, I could give you that information via roster reviews. That's something I would do. The next question I saw, and this kind of came up from Max Zach and I. So Max Zach is an arena shard mate of mine, and we were talking about Bo-Katan coming back already. And he kind of said, he's like, this is just complete FOMO for Wales. This is kind of them really trying to cash in on her. And the other thing he said, I really love the way he said this. He goes, I think she's coming back not only because players are missing out on her, but because of the Datacron. And I really liked this. That when you think about if you go to StarWarsGalaxyofHeroes.gg, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to go here, and let's get to here, and let's go here. All right. Let me pop this over. Give me 1 second here, guys. We're going to pop over to GG once I get that popped up and running. Okay, there we go. All right. So now we're on StarWarsGalaxyofHeroes.gg. So only, 1,800 players have a Relic Bo-Katan Mandalore. So, and the vast majority of players who have her Relic, or at least Relic 5, or they'd be able to use her Datacron. And this was a really good point that he brought up, that Bo-Katan, it's not just the whaling on her that's important to Capital Games, but a lot of their revenue is also dependent on that Datacron. And when you take a look at that and we go back to the game, you think about the Datacrons that are big right now, right? That the most important Datacrons in the game are for characters like Bo-Katan Mandalore, Dark Trooper Gideon, Dr. Aphra, Coors Light Leia, they're characters that are much more sort of tilted towards end game players. And I think that's something that they are trying to capitalize on, to say, well, we need these guys to be spending, because the average player, they're going to get their one Afracron if they even have her, their one, Leia-cron, and then they might get the best armor Mando if they want it, but otherwise they don't really have the characters to take advantage of these Datacrons. So the issue I think with these current sets, and as sets kind of continue, Capital Games is going to have to be careful that you can't make the characters so focused in that end game that the rest of the player base doesn't want to spend on them, because Datacrons are already highly unpopular, as we know. And I really thought it was an interesting thing when he said that it's not just about getting them to wail on Bo-Katan because they missed out, but with her Datacron as well, If people aren't trying to re-roll those stats and get those things, they're missing out on resources, right? So I thought that was a very interesting thing, so shout out, Zach. Finally, I want to get to this question from Andrew Bradshaw, and this was a good question. He kind of asked, he's like, Phil, I'm going for Supreme Leader Kylo Ren in the journey. He's like, and I have all the shards, I just need gear. And then he said, he's like, and then after that, I'm going for Jedi Knight Luke, who none of the characters I have left for him need to be, need regular energy. Like, they're all characters that I need, other forms of energy for. He said, so should I just be focusing on gear with my regular energy and not farm shards? And I was like, no. The reason why you never want to just be farming gear is because of the way that progress works in this game. Remember, gear will naturally accumulate in your roster. Once you're level 85, remember, once you're level 85, you get that reward box. I've already cashed mine in, but you get that reward box every day that gives you Kyrotex, that gives you core gear. Think about your galactic challenges, right? You do your galactic challenges every single time. You're going to be getting gear through, and rewards through this. That stuff accumulates, but character shards do not. You can't afford to take time off from farming character shards because they take significantly longer than anything else. Like, think about it. If you don't farm a shard for, say, 3 months, so you lost 90 days of farming, and say that character is accelerated, so you're looking at roughly 180 shards of that character that you just missed out on because you didn't farm their node. And their nodes aren't expensive. Think about, like, Saw Gerrera's node is what? This is a 12 energy node, so it's 60 energy a day that you could be spending on, and again, that's just in my, my example, but think about another good one here could be, let's go to the bottom of the roster to find somebody who, I gotta go to like a, say you want to get, who would be a good example here? Jabba the Hutt, right? You're trying to get Jabba the Hutt, so you need Coors Light Leia. Where's she at? So her node, if you're like, oh, well, I'm not ready for her yet, I need to get some other stuff, so I'm just going to hold off, I'm not going to farm her yet. For 60 energy a day, you can get 2 shards. Over 90 days, that could be 180 shards. If you don't farm that node for that period of time and you just focus on the gear, you missed out on all the opportunity you had to get those shards. And the gear you gained during that time, just remember, you would have gotten gear along the way. So then, as you're farming her, you're also accumulating gear. And so you'll probably put yourself in a position where you're going to have almost like too much gear and not enough shards. And if I had to pick one or the other, I'd rather have more character shards than gear, because then you're less tempted to equip gear to characters that you otherwise don't need. Like, I can tell you guys, with the hoarding that I'm doing right now, I know this sounds like an oxymoron. You're like, Phil, I'd rather have more gear. You're an idiot. But think about it. My big things that I'm saving for right now, Bane, Gideon, Cal, the Saw Gerrera stuff, right? I'm trying to, save for all this stuff. Do you know how hard it's been for me to not just go into, like, my Imperial Remnants and click, like, gear, and, like, I've had to really show restraint. So I think that as free-to-play, you really need to make sure that you're constantly farming characters. And even if you're like, well, I don't know what character to farm, then go farm ships. You can't afford to slack progress on hard nodes, because at the current moment, you might not need anything. Think about in 6 months from now, do you want to have progress towards those shards? That for 3 months, you're like, I don't really know what, it's just gear I need. Farm some ships. Just farm the ships. Spend that time doing that. It will pay off down the road. And this was another point from Zach that he brought up, and this is, I'll kind of leave you with this thought here. So shout out, Zach, double shout out. When you reach towards the later stages of the game, like where I'm definitely transitioning more into that end game, the biggest holdups for me still now are character shards, Kyrotex, and signal data. That's all that normally stands in my way of getting these new characters, right? Is those things. But that's only the new stuff, right? Like, what's keeping me, like, there's not a lot that's keeping me from, gearing, say, like, Admiral Trench, right? Like, I could go gear Admiral Trench. Like, there's a lot of characters who I can just gear up at any point in time if I wanted, because I've gotten all of their shards over the years. And that, I think, is a very important thing to understand. That you want to put yourself in a position that at the end of the game, you really want your bottlenecks to just be shards, Kyrotech, and Signal Data. And the shards that you're wanting them to be a bottleneck are for newer things. You don't want your bottleneck for Galactic Legends Ray to be, or, you know, Galactic Legend Sith Eternal to be character shards for Krennic and, you know, stuff like that. Like, you want to have those things done and dusted by the time you're ready, because later down the road, that's when you're going to be farming these single drop nodes that take longer. And so if you don't have as much time to commit to them, it's going to make you spend more resources, take more time to get stuff, and going to delay your progress in this game. So all of that said, I know I rambled there for a little bit, but all of that really being that don't ever stop farming nodes. Even if, like, right now you're like, I don't really have a node to farm, find something you need and just start farming it. I promise it will pay you dividends down the line. That's the end of the video. Like, subscribe, comment. If you're still watching, Wampa is king in the comments. I love you all. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.